we want to close out our presentation with a few minutes here of a closing statement. And someone said to me, no one in this room, but someone very accurately and brightly pulled me aside, since we represent so many unions and so many municipalities and colleges and school systems. We're blessed to be able to do that. And someone said, it really doesn't matter what the magistrate ruled. It's only a recommendation, which it is, and you don't have the votes on the commission. We may not. Politics is a tough place. It's okay. It's an election year, and it's very good for electioneering to build your slogans on the back of employees, and to never talk about taxes, and to never talk about wealth disparity, etc. But there is a principle here in the law, and the reason why a magistrate mechanism was put back in 1974 when the act, which took place in 75, was implemented, and that was that we ask an outsider to come in, someone, of high credentials. I think there are 40 special magistrates, and we ask that person to come in and make a recommendation, albeit non-binding. And on one hand, it's a nullity. On the other hand, it's not. Because the law is very clear in the statute. And under the law, we believe clearly that we have proven that across the board, a structural raise is required. It is fair under the law. You can take the emotion of what we've heard here today. They're very compelling, and I think they are relevant, but they still have to be put into the Cuisinart of the algorithms of municipal financing. And so when you look at the statute, it gives you a way home. It is a beacon. And it is the same exact beacon that caused us to have to take concessions when we were spiraling downward. But that same beacon must be applied honestly and truthfully under the law if the law is to have any meaning in both letter and spirit. The city is booming. Is it fully recovered? Probably not. Do we ever want to go back to those days? No. Should we do something that is either reckless or irresponsible? No. We wouldn't do that as AFSCME. Sean wouldn't do it. Lee Saunders wouldn't do it. And we wouldn't let the mayor and the manager, find it odd that the manager wouldn't be here today. He's traveling, but it's amazing how these things mean so much to folks. But all that being said, we wouldn't ask that. But it is just as irresponsible as putting in financial obligations that one can't handle. It is equally irresponsible to use that in a perverse way against the workforce. Now, how do you know if it's perverse? How do you know? Well, the numbers. I have done this since 1980. This is my 34th year of practicing. I've never had a CFO be willing to come forward and say, look, I had to say the hard realities when they were hard, and I'll say it. He's opined there's an ability to pay. The data is irrefutable that the city is now mounting surplus. They're building surpluses. What is really easy to say, and what they do in their conference rooms when they come up with the PR of these cases, is let's say, we're not there yet. Oh my God, we never want to go backwards. Let's never fly on a plane again because one disappeared from the radar screen on Air Malaysia. You don't want that to happen again. And so it must be the science of the math, and it must be the tenets of the law that guide us. They have the ability to pay. It's just irrefutable. Then the next question is, well, can we throw some statistics at you to take you off the ability to pay thing, like the city's median income is the $28,000 versus the county 41. That is a misapprehension of the reality of what goes on. And we don't live here anyway. Then the next thing they'll say is, can we throw 5 selected, cherry-picked, bootstrapped, regressive statistical analyses at you to say, these folks make roughly, they're in the top or in the mid-range of the 7 or 6 comparable municipalities. What does that mean? I mean, no offense, but that's not dispositive of this case. So they have the ability to pay. And then we add to the statute, this is a unique workforce. You want to keep this workforce, you want to keep them employed. And they love the city, but given the hazards and the skills, it's something to put into the calculus. But the real issue beyond ability to pay is the statutory section, I don't know if it's sub 3, I can't remember, that talks about public benefit, the good of the public. And everything of this case the centrifuge of this case brings us to that core. Because at the end of the day, when you give back 80 plus million, as you just said, and every give back is structural and across the board, compounding and recurring. And CPI, as it erodes our buying power, is by definition of all economists, compounding and recurring. And when you wait and give up that money, which will continue, if it's 89 million and we're asking for roughly 5 million back, 83 million of it will go on next year and the year until the over 80 million continues until that. So they have our handshake, our covenant, our special magistrate rulings, they have that 80 million following that. We're just asking for 5 of it, or 5%, I'm sorry, which is $3 million, I misspoke. We're asking for 3 million of it, right? 3% of it back, going forward in a structural way. And the biggest issue, you have two issues to decide after the threshold issue of whether we deserve anything at all, and that is what will the digit be, 2, 5, or what, you're not bound by that, as well as the most critical issue, which is the recurring nature of it. You cannot ask employees in the public interest and welfare and as policy, we cannot ask them to be there during these days, to accept recommendations of magistrates of pay cuts, to lose an arbitration over the interpretation of what the fiscal urgency law, which is in a great state of confusion in Florida. Forget all that. Win or lose arbitrations, win or lose Supreme Court decisions, hopefully we win. All those things we put aside. But there comes a moment, and this is the moment, albeit small, that tests us. And I know it's a bit ironic, but we talk about the great disparity of wealth in this country. It's a great debate right now. It's a great debate about security income for pensioners and retirement security. Right now, student debt, as Barbara talked about, is greater than auto loan debt, and it's greater than credit card debt. And if you combine the two, it's almost equal. That's what we're doing to people here. We're killing people. And at the end of the day, I can't do anything except flip the channels on C-SPAN or MSNBC and watch these shows and wonder, and I don't think that I have anything to do with it. I don't create the robber barons. People deserve their money that make a lot of money. I don't begrudge them. But in a way, all of us, including our good colleagues there, today is that day. This hearing is a hearing that says, in a small measure, where was the law? Where was the Public Employee Relations Act? Where was the special magistrate procedure when 1,000 workers came and asked for 3% back on 80 plus million? This is the very moment, and as we put together slides, and you're going to see a slideshow, and as you put together things to try to change the view of this, we realize at the end of the day, the law is clear. And as I finish this, I want to give you just an example. I have 100 pennies here. I know you know the math, and I know how bright you are, but I just want to remind us. This 100 pennies, as you're falling apart, this 100 pennies in this roll, we're asking if this roll represented all the concessions we've given, we're asking for 3 pennies back. Less than 3%. If this 100 pennies represented the city budget, I can't break a penny in half unless I'm asking for less. Y'all get to keep all this money. We bill more hours than they'll ever see. The lawyers, and I'll put my reputation on it, on the SEC case, all made more money than the $3 million if you aggregate that together. The amount of money politicians raise to get reelected, cumulatively, will be more than a lot of the money we're asking for. When does it stop under the law? When does the law bring us home and say, I'm asking for a half of a penny, how much do you want? Why can't you give it to me year after year? My bills are year after year. But most importantly, while the rest of us, and I drive off in a Cadillac Escalade, and I drive off in my car, and I drive and I can't even see because I go 60 miles an hour, people with broken jalousie windows, people don't have the money to go to Honduras for a funeral. These are all real issues. You all have turned the city around together. Share it. Morality requires it. Labor relations requires it. But for you, the only thing that can require it is the law. We have proven ability to pay. We have proven the sacrifice. We don't need to hear about mumbo jumbo, what one union did and what the other, when they don't lay the longitudinal history out because they're not apples to apples. Everything comes down to that 447 and 405 tells us that the recommendation should be swift and unequivocal. An across-the-board raise of 5% is due and owing under the law for what you've done. And my last words are to you all. I'll abuse the system for a moment. It's hard to give that money and see the gold line move. It's hard to take away from your folks, your family, and find that 4 strikes mean an out. Because we didn't know that they were going to change the way they look at the budget and always have another excuse. It's hard to be at groundbreaking with ceremonial shovels and hard hats and ribbon cutting and talk about how great the city is and cranes everywhere, and you have to have tears in your eyes because you can't afford your automobile. She had to drop out of Miami-Dade College, the cheapest institution of higher ed in this community, and her credit's ruined. But don't let it take away what you do every day at work. Continue to do the work you do. Because despite what politicians do, and budget finance people, and the huddling offices to try to take the pennies from you, there's one thing that pennies don't represent, and that's who you are. That your kids and your grandkids and your nieces and nephews know that you're a really good police officer, aides, you're really good architects, you're really good tree trimmers, you keep me safe, you go outside when the hurricanes come when I go hide, you walk into scenes when everybody else is cordoned off by the yellow ribbon. You do an amazing thing that I can't do in the private sector. So whatever the decision, whatever the pennies, you're wealthy in the pride that you have and the way you serve the city. This concludes AFSCME's case. Thank you, Mr. Madison. Thank you, Mr. Madison. Question for everybody is, what is the union's proposal? This is only a wage reopener, so we stuck to the 4 corners of that. We're not talking about freezing, step advancing, anything else other than a 5% across the board wage increase.
One last thing. Will I find any comparables in your package?
No, we did not do it. We can't do it. We had asked the city for a copy of their comparables. We understand they were working on it. Mike is a straight shooter, and we don't have that.
Would you like to examine it?
Mr. Richard and I talked beforehand, and I think it's probably more efficient for us not to. We'll respond with data to their data. With regard to the testimony that
Okay.
We've agreed just to do classroom style, and we're finished.
So we take a 10-minute break at 3%.
well, I was wondering if we should take a quick motion, because I have I think 35 slides, and it's probably going to be a response to maybe 5 to 10 of their slides. So we're talking about maybe an hour.
I have a plan left. We do have food upstairs that we could bring down here, share with everybody. If that helps.
When is your flight?
My flight doesn't leave until 6, so.
Well, it would be nice to share that with you. Thank you. We're ready for half an hour.
Thank you, Mr. Lurie. Again, my name is Mike Madden with the law firm of Allen Williams. Is this a good sound?
Yes.
Mike, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Lurie, and everyone in the audience and everyone participating in this hearing this afternoon. I believe that you have a hard copy of the slides. They're also being shown on the wall for the purposes of the people in the audience. I'd like to start at page 2 with an overview and tell you what we'd like to accomplish this afternoon. We'd like to go through a brief summary of the negotiations that led us to this impasse hearing today. We'd like to do a bargaining unit overview, capture again, I know Mr. Richard did a good job of it, but capture again what this unit looks like. We'd like to talk about some relevant and compelling information with regard to the local economy and the local labor market. We'd like to talk about the financials of the city. And then we'd like to lastly talk about our management proposals. So I'm going to now take everyone to slide number 4, which is a summary of the fiscal year 2014 negotiations. As we've already said a couple of times, this is a wage reopener of a contract. We started these negotiations in March of 2013. We've had 9 sessions. I would like to point out that halfway through this process, in between the August 21st, 2013 bargaining session and the November 12th, 2013 bargaining session, the city approached AFSCME 1907 and offered to provide a 3% non-recurring wage action. Now those funds and that wage action was not offered with the obligation that they had to close out the wages for this reopening. It was done because the city got to the end of the year. They had some money in the budget surplus, and they decided to share that money with the employees in the workforce. So they went through all of the bargaining units, and they offered all the bargaining units a 3% wage adjustment with a non-recurring nature. So in the middle of these negotiations, there has been a wage action that we should consider in the big picture of things. So, since the beginning of these wage negotiations, if you look at the 3% non-recurring and the 2% non-recurring on the table, we're actually looking at the total wage action of 5% non-recurring. Now, if I take you to page number 5, and this is a summary of our negotiations. As I heard the union today, their proposal is a 5% increase to base salaries. And you also heard today, Mr. Lurie, that there are some employees who were laid off because of the necessity of the financial conditions of the city in 2009 and 10. And some of those people were recalled. And some of them were recalled by an agreement with the union, and they were brought back at an amount, in some instances less than the amount they were paid when they were laid off. And that's part of this resolution of the wage article is that AFSCME 1907 has asked us to restore any of the pay differential that was experienced by someone who was brought back. So if you were brought back from the layoff of 15% less, give those people a 15% pay adjustment so that they're whole to the amount when they left. And that was a request, part of the request. So that is part of this action. And we have agreed to that. So the differences between the 5% increase to base salaries and the 2% non-recurring, but the action of the 15 people who were impacted by the layoff, we both agreed to bring them to the current minimum of the salary range.
That issue not.
Well, yeah, I know, it's part of the wage action, I just wanted, that's part of the wage settlement, and we had a wage settlement. Impasse was declared by the union in January 2014, and as Mr. Richard pointed out, we are in current negotiations for next year's contract, because by our contract, we have a season of negotiations. We have to begin negotiations by a certain date with the exchange of proposals, which has happened. So we actually are now, we're looking at the resolution of the wage reopener for fiscal year 2014, but we are in active exchange of proposals for 2014-15, and we want to talk to you about that. So, if we go to page 6, it's the summary of the fiscal year 2014 negotiations and the financial impact of the proposals. Yes.
Thank you.
For a second there, I thought I was in Hollywood. So, it is true that the proposal's $3 million recurring for 1907, and it's a $1.2 million non-recurring amount for our proposal. But that's just the 2%. That's not the bringing the people back, 15 people back. That's also not factoring in the 3% non-recurring that was provided at the end of last fiscal year. Now, reasons that we're going to go into in a minute. 2014, 2015 presents some fiscal challenges for the city of Miami. We are doing better, but we are not to a place yet where we can be comfortable with our finances. And in particular, 14, 15 seems like it's going to be a year in which we're going to have expenses that will exceed our revenue. And so, to have a recurring wage action, moving into 14, 15, not beyond, and that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to talk about 14, 15's proposal, which is recurring. But moving into 14, 15 with a recurring burden and the challenges that we already have is taking us back a step. It's taking us into the wrong direction. And we all know what happened when we were in that frame of mind and taking those kinds of actions in 2006 to 2010. A lot of the burden that everyone felt, including the citizens of the city, as well as its employees, were a direct result of those actions back then. A lack of fiscal conservatism, a lack of fiscal responsibility. Now, if I take you to slide number 7. We also had wage reopeners with another bargaining unit in the city. It's ASPE 871, and that is the sanitation workers of the city. We went to the bargaining table, and ASPE 871 agreed to the 2% non-recurring pay that we currently offer 1907. And we think that's one of the critical aspects of an analysis of a position taken at the bargaining table that didn't pass. Because no group is more geographically or directly related to 1907 than another bargaining unit that exists under the ASPE umbrella in the same city, in the same work. Now, at 8, these are some other considerations that we have that lead us to the point where we believe that non-recurring wages is how we should resolve these negotiations. And I'm going to bring you back to what I pointed out was this wage action that occurred in the middle of our negotiations on this reopening. It was a 3% non-recurring pay action that occurred in September 2013. And it came from the 2013 fiscal year budget. All of the employee groups, all of the bargaining units received this money. The cost to the city of this non-recurring pay action in September of 2013 was $6.5 million. if I could ask you to direct your attention to slide number 9, which is sort of a summary of our 2013 and 2014 wage actions. You can see that in 2013, at the end of the year, during these negotiations, 1907 received a 3% non-recurring, and for 2014, it's an impasse. 871 was 3% non-recurring and 2% non-recurring for 14. The FOP had a 2-year contract. They had 3% non-recurring they actually received it in fiscal year 2014, but it's the same action, grouping of actions that occurred at the end of 2013. And they had a 3% partial year pay increase in 2014. Now, the police, this is part of a 2-year contract, not a wage reopening. So the police received a 3% increase. The police, though, in their contract, and I'll be providing you with a chart that shows that it's paid for that by making concessions in the contract. So the monies, they came to the table and said, if we make certain concessions to the city, will you let us have that money back in a wage action? The IFF did the same thing. The IFF came to the table and said, if we give you some concessions, including about $3.4 million in state 175 monies, which is their money, not our money, that they transferred it to the city, can we buy a 7 longevity catch-up in 2013? But they are receiving no wage increase whatsoever in 2014, recurring or non-recurring. And then the non-unionized people received a 3% non-recurring in 2013, September 2013 increase, but they're receiving no wage increase in 2014. Like I said, I'll give you a handout that will show the police and fire concessions that led to their 2-year contract. Now, I want to point out something about the millions and millions of dollars that were in those concessions in those 2-year contracts. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about in a minute, because that is part of our concern for 14. We are currently in a 2-year contract with police and fire that have millions and millions of dollars of concessions. And when their contracts expire, those concessions will go away. So we're going to have all of those cost pressures come back to the city, come back to our budget. Now I'm going to switch to what is kind of an overview of this bargaining unit, ASCII 1907. On page 11, we have the counts of employees by classification groups. That's the largest classification group. On 12, we have a spread of those people and how much their average salary is for this bargaining unit. The average salary for the entire spread is $51,873. On slide number 14, we want to start looking at the local economy and the local labor market. And you know, this is a reality that we must deal with. It's not anecdotal. It's not looking at whether there's a building that might go up in 3 years. It's not whether or not a wealthy person moves into town. This is the city, and this is the tax base. And this is the people that live here and pay taxes and are served. And their median household income in 2012 was $28,301. But that's not the average salary. That's the median household income. That's whether you have 2 or 3 or 4 salaries in a household. The total average median, in Miami was $28,301. You know, Miami, it's beyond dispute. It remains one of the poorest municipalities in the nation. Now, the average annual salary, if I compare back to a couple slides for the ASCII 1907 numbers, is $51,874. So that annual average salary compares quite favorably to the entire household income in the median in the city of Miami. Now, if you look at the household income in the city of Miami compared to Miami-Dade, it's off by $13,000. The state of Florida, it's off by $17,000. The United States, it's off by 22. Now, that's the reality that we all must live with as we look at taxes and as we look at our tax base. Now, what we did was we looked at the economic and demographic characteristics of Miami to the three largest counties, the three largest cities in Broward County, and the six largest cities in Miami-Dade, to see how we compare with those public entities. And on slide 16, you see the local market, the local economy and the local market. And we're reflecting for 2012, the population, the per capita income, the median household income, the poverty rate, and the unemployment rate for 2014. And that's been, that unemployment rate's been updated to February 2014, which is the latest hard numbers. And as you can see, the per capita income, Miami is $20,000 compared to a median of $26,000. From high to low, we're 9 of 13. And you can see the other cities. Household income, Miami is $28,000 and the median is $42,000. The poverty rate in Miami is 31.7% compared to a median of 19%. We're 2 out of 13 in the benchmark in poverty rate. And unemployment is 7.7% in February 2014, where the median of all these other entities is 5.6%. That's the third out of 13. It's reflected on slide 17. Miami has the lowest median household income and the second highest poverty rate in the benchmarking group. Per capita income in Miami is 21.5% lower than the median of the benchmarking group. The unemployment rate in Miami is 37.5% higher than the median of the benchmarking group. So there is economic recovery. But the residents of the city of Miami are clearly more economically challenged than our neighboring jurisdictions. On slide 18, I'm going to talk for a second about the millage rate. And we can explain the difference between a total millage and an operating millage, but if you look at the millage rates in 2013 of these benchmarking groups, which are cities and municipalities in our area, in Broward and Dade County, and the counties, Miami has the second highest operating millage rate of all. They have a millage rate of 7.6148. They have a total millage of 8.431. Their total millage rate is the highest of all 13 benchmark municipalities and counties. So Miami has the second highest operating millage rate, but the highest total millage rate in this benchmarking group. So, the point, I think, is easily made. By millage, we're the highest tax, and by median income, we're the poorest. And with poverty rate, our poverty rate is the poorest. That is a reality that we all must take into account as we make our fiscal plan. I guess I'm going to digress for just a second, but we put it on materials. The fact that in 2010, the city of Miami was seriously facing a financial crisis, where their budget was off by about in excess of $100 million. That if we were to balance the budget with layoffs, and we heard earlier today about a person being laid off, And we attempted to minimize layoffs and to bring people back when we could. We heard the story today of someone who was brought back. And we see today in our article that of the 15 people that are still below the minimum, we're willing to adjust them so we can have that layoff to the extent we have to do it, minimized and restored back. But because of the actions and the policies and the practices, the economic practices and fiscal practices that started in 2006, if you look at both our slides and the slides presented by 1907, this was a systemic situation that began in the mid-2000s. It wasn't because of the crash in 2008. It was because of what was being spent in 2006 and 2007 and 2008 and 2009. Money that the city was just not bringing in. To the point that when we got to 2010, we were looking at personnel costs alone that would exceed 100% of our budget. Now these are figures, these are realities that courts have looked at, PERC has looked at, hearing officers have looked at, experts have testified to, and they've all come down on the same numbers. This is the fiscal reality. Now, to move us past that, and the obviousness of proceeding fiscally with our budget carefully, so we're not tracing those steps back again to another crisis. I wanted to move into our comparative information, which starts on slide number 19. Now, the city did not cherry pick any position in the bargaining unit because we thought how it would compare. We have never done, to my knowledge, a comparison of every position, and I don't even know how you would go about doing that, but what we did, you'll see, is we contacted the cities that we are comparative to. We picked 5 positions because we looked at position descriptions of the city of Miami and the position descriptions for the same positions at these other cities, and we found them to be remarkably similar. So we found that these were people that are doing the same kinds of jobs across these cities. And we're going to take a snapshot. It's 5, it's not 250, but it's better than nothing. And they're not all professional. They run a cross-section of people who labor like electricians, professionals like accountants, and people who work in offices like clerks. So what we did was we asked the current minimum base pay, the maximum base pay, and the maximum base pay with longevity from each of these jurisdictions, and we received responses from 8 of the jurisdictions. And we have all of this transaction is done online. So, if you look at the accountant, the minimum base pay, the median minimum base pay, median in comparison, Miami is at 40,000. The median is 49,804. Out of 9, in high to low, for maximum base
we're 6 of 9.
the median is
For maximum base pay, the median is 63,000, and ours is 53,000. We're 8 of 9.
and maximum base with longevity.
And maximum base with longevity.
Kind of
Now, with that, we
catch up.
kind of
And with that, we have
catch up. And with that, we have 67,727,000 compared to
That's probably the
5.
most
That's
accurate
probably
of,
the most accurate of
maximum
the
base with
reflection
longevity,
of
because we have longevity.
maximum base with longevity, because we have longevity
Municipalities do not.
and other
So at
municipalities
that,
do
we're
not.
5 of 9, we're in the middle.
So at that,
If
we're
we were
5
cherry
of 9,
picking,
we're in the middle.
that
And
probably
if we were
looks
cherry picking,
okay, but not great. for
probably
us
looks
comparable.
okay.
We're in the middle of the pack. We're not one
we're in
of
the
the
middle of the pack.
So then we looked at the auto mechanic,
So then we looked at the,
and we looked at minimum, maximum,
and we looked at minimum, maximum.
And here mine starts to reflect the
And
current
here mine starts to
comparative
reflect
information
the
that,
comparative information
reflects that we were actually,
that
reflects that we are actually,
position at a rate higher than
this
our
position
comparables.
at a rate higher than our comparables.
The Miami minimum is
The
41,000.
Miami
The
minimum
maximum
is
is
41,000.
55,000. The maximum longevity is 69,000.
The maximum
The
longevity
median
is
without Miami, back Miami out.
the median without Miami, back Miami out,
We're one with the
32,588.
highest of the seven.
We're one with the
Reported.
highest of the seven.
49,279. For maximum base pay,
49,279
2 out of 7.
for maximum
With
base
maximum
pay
pay
of 2 out of
of
7. With maximum pay
We're
of
69,000 compared to 51,000, which is
We're
the top
69,000 compared to 51,000
benchmark group of the seven.
of the benchmark group of 7.
Then we looked at building inspector,
Then we looked at building inspector, another
another significant
another
number of
significant
employees
number of
in the city of Miami
employees
as part of the unit or building
in
inspector.
the city of Miami and this part of the unit of building.
The minimum base pay, Ed Miami,
The minimum base pay,
50,000 compared to
Ed Miami
the
is
median of
50,000
53,000.
compared to the median of
The
53.
maximum, Miami 67,000
The maximum,
to 79,000.
Miami 67,000 to 79,000. When you factor in the actual, which
Miami's
is maximum base
84,000
with
compared to
longevity,
81,000.
Miami's 84,000 compared to 81,000.
Respective
So we're
number
3 out of
in
7,
comparison to,
again, a respectable number in comparison to
the benchmark group.
the,
On slide number 23, we did a comparison.
slide number 23, we did a comparison
The
for
Miami clerk, minimum base pay is
the Miami clerk, minimum base pay is $25,279. Median without Miami is
The maximum base pay
$24,423.
is 34,700.
The maximum base pay is $34,773.
But
The
when
median
you
is
actually look at
$38,792.
what
But
we
when
pay
you
with our
actually
longevity
look at
history
what we
versus
pay with our longevity
comparables,
history versus our
the maximum
comparables,
base of longevity for a clerk is 42,186
the maximum base of longevity for a clerk is 42,186 compared to
And
41,700.
these don't look like cherry picked.
I mean, these don't look like cherry
I
picked
think they're instructive.
to me. I think they're instructive.
Michael, that's really sure. This is scale to scale, not where people are operating.
Scale to scale.
Scale to scale.
So, the labor economy and
So,
labor market.
the labor
minimum base
economy
pay
and
for
labor market,
entry-level electrician,
minimum base pay for
50,000,
entry-level electrician,
37
$50,337 compared to 47,946.
621 compared to
67,621 compared
And the
to
maximum base of longevity,
61,129.
what
And the
people are
maximum
actually
base of
earning
longevity,
in
which
Miami,
is what people are
as
actually
compared
earning
to
in Miami,
what people are earning at the
as
maximum
compared to
base in the
people earning
comparators
the
is
maximum base
84,000.
in the comparators is
So we're 2 out of 7
84,000.
for that.
So we're 2 out of 7 for that
Position. So you look at,
position. So if you
slide
look
number
at
25,
slide number 25,
we are higher than the median
we
by
are
35%
higher
of
than
the
the
auto
median
mechanic,
by
by
35%
3.7%
of the auto
of the inspector,
by 3.7%
by
of the inspector,
with the clerk,
by 1%,
26.2% of the electrician,
26.2%
and the accountant is
of the
below them.
electrician, and the accountant is below them.
Now,
Now,
what we're trying to do to help the special
we're trying to
magistrate is to lay out
to help the
facts.
special
We're not
magistrate
trying
is to
to
lay out
spin them, we're not trying to
spin them,
demagogue anything, we're not trying to lay blame on anyone,
demagogue
we're just
anything,
trying
we're not trying to lay blame on anyone,
lay
we're
out
trying
facts.
to
And,
lay out
you know,
the,
our
and
expenditures of
you
the
know,
city of Miami grew,
our expenditures
and our
of
revenues
Miami
declined,
grew,
and we had
and our
operating
revenues
deficits.
declined, and we had
Every
operating
fiscal
deficits.
year, between fiscal year
Every fiscal
2007,
year,
fiscal year
between fiscal year
2000.
2007 and
Every
fiscal
year.
year 2000.
If you were to look at the slide,
Every year.
there's a slide that.
If you were to look at
was
the
presented
slide,
in
there's a
the
slide that-
1907 presentation, which reflects that.
1907
It's
presentation.
probably the deficits
It's
over these
probably
period
the
of time.
deficits
The operating
over these
deficits added
period of
up
time. The
would
operating
probably
deficits
be
added
between
up
200 and 250
would
million.
probably be between 200 and 250 million.
That's the gap.
That's the
And
gap.
that's all starts in '06.
And that's
When
all
there's
starts in
expenditures
06.
exceeding
When
revenue,
there's
and we simply
expenditures
do not
in
pay
revenue, and we simply
for
do not
the-
pay
for the services and for the costs.
for the
that city
services
has
and for the
committed to.
costs that the city has committed to.
The budget deficit was
As I
The
mentioned
budget
before,
deficit
projected to
was,
peak in
as I
2011,
mentioned before,
personnel
projected
costs
to peak in
alone
2011,
exceeding
the personnel
$100,000.
costs alone exceeding $100,000.
In 2010, the city declared
In
financial
2010,
urgency.
the city declared financial urgency.
And
under
had
4.74
contract
on 9.5,
modifications to bring
and
expenditures
had
in line
contract
with
modifications
projected
to bring
revenues.
expenditures
And I know
in
we
line
talked a little
with
bit about
projected
this.
revenues,
There was
and I know we've
some,
talked a little bit about this, some
information provided in the 1907
Information
presentation
provided
about what actions were taken by the
19
city
presentation
with
about
regard to all the
with
to
regard
try
to
to
all
bring those
the,
personnel costs in line.
to try to bring those personnel
Meet their
costs
budget.
in line so that they meet their budget.
Leading to the revenue. But one of
But,
the interesting
you know,
things is that it
one
didn't
of
stop
the
there.
interesting things is that it
It
didn't
wasn't a
stop there.
single year event.
It wasn't a
The
single
city
year
of
event.
Miami's financial
The
house,
city of
although
Miami's
corrected to some
financial
extent,
house, although corrected to some
continued
extent,
to have operating deficits.
continued
Continue
to have operating deficits.
revenues versus,
Continue to have revenues
expenses
versus,
fall out of whack, so that revenues
expenses
were not able
fall
to
out of
meet
whack, so
growing
that
expenses
revenues were not
continued
able to
year after year after year,
growing
even with the
expenses
contract
continued year after year after
modifications. So
year,
that the
even with
city
the contract
was
modifications.
forced
So that the city
in
was forced
2010
in 2000
and 2011 to
in
declare financial
2011
emergency again.
declare financial urgency again.
Now, when 2011 declared
When
financial urgency,
2011 declared financial urgency.
the unions came to the table and we reached agreements.
The unions came
In
to
their
the table and
closing
reached
line.
agreements.
But that is because everyone was looking at the numbers.
But that is
Everyone
because
saw that
everyone
this
was
the
looking at
reality of the city was
Everyone
facing.
saw that this
I
was
mean,
the
look at
reality
it.
that the city was facing.
Look at
I mean, look at Look at-
how, in 2011,
how in 2011,
the expenditures still are just
the expenditures still are just
the same as revenue. And revenue doesn't start to
the same as revenue. And
move
revenue
past
doesn't start to
expenditures until
move
12.
past expenditures into 12 and 13.
Now, I want to talk a little bit
Now,
about on slide 28.
I want to talk a little bit about on
financial
slide 28,
integrity
the
principles.
financial
As-
integrity
as I
principle.
think, Mr. Spring
As I
earlier
think
today.
Mr.
The city
Spring
of Miami
mentioned
has
earlier
not been
today.
in this
The city of Miami
circumstance,
has not been in this
2000,
circumstance
9 and 10
in
in
2009
isolation.
and
The city of
10.
Miami
in
had
isolation.
similar
The city of Miami
circumstances
had similar
in the 1990s.
in the
And
1990s.
they passed
Um,
to prevent
And they
that from
passed
occurring.
to prevent that from occurring in the
And as a
2000s.
result, you know, by
And,
having
and,
this.
and as a
this,
result, you know, by having this
comfortable,
comfortable,
fiscally responsible budget, it
fiscally
doesn't mean that
responsible budget,
employees
it
are
doesn't
lurched
mean
into having to face
employees
layoffs,
are lurched into having to face layoffs, or
fiscal
lurched
urgency,
into
or
having
lurched into having
fiscal
concessions.
urgency, or lurched into having concessions.
The city said we have got to have.
The city
a
said we have got to have a financially,
And so in
get that
2000,
financial integrity. And so in 2000,
because of the
because of the
instability
instability in the 90s, the city
that
of
required
Miami
general
passed
fund
an
balance
ordinance
reserve level
that required general fund
be
balance
maintained
reserve
at all
levels
times
to
at
be
20%
maintained at
of
all
operating
times at 20% of operating revenue.
Now, clearly, that
Now, clearly,
went off
that
the table in 2009.
went off the table in 2009.
And in 2012 and 2013.
And in 2012 and 2013, the city is trying to move itself back toward its obligation under law to have this
reserve. And so we're moving toward.
reserve level.
And we have
And so we're
restored
moving toward
the
it.
reserve balance.
And we
to some
have
extent
restored the
this
reserve
year.
balance to
And we
some
hope to
extent
do it to some
this
extent
year.
this
And we hope to do
But
it
we're still
to some
below
extent
where we
this
need
year.
to be.
But we're still below where we need it to be.
Now, if you look at 29. we
Now, if you look
talked
at
earlier
29,
about,
we talked earlier
the village
about
rate, the city of Miami being the
the
highest
village
in the
rate,
county.
the city of Miami being the highest in Dade County, among the benchmark
Cities,
um,
counties, and entities that we.
cities and
have
counties and
listed
entities
on
that
the
we
previous slide.
have listed on the previous slide.
But in 2009, our property
But
tax.
in
receipts
2009,
was at
our
266.9
property tax
million.
receipts was at $266.9 million.
In fiscal year 2013, there were
In
only
fiscal
back
year
to
2013,
209.
they were only back to 209.
So we are $58 million
So we are
In
$58 million
below the
in
property tax
2013,
that we had in
below the
2000.
property tax receipts that we had
So
in 2000.
we're moving forward, but the property, there's not been a property tax receipt windfall in the city of Miami.
But the property, there's not been a property tax receipt windfall at the city of Miami.
If I could direct your attention to 30,
Now,
and
if I could direct your attention
I
to 30.
think if you look at
And-
slide 16,
I think if you look at slide 16,
today,
of 1907's presentation, it reflects that the assessed value today is still below 2007, 2008, 2009,
slide 20 to 21, 1907. it
If you
looks to me
compare
like there's about a
slide 20 to
$250 million
21
gap
of
in revenue.
1907, it looks to me like there's
So the
about
financial
a $222
projection
million
for
gap. in revenue.
2014 is that there will be an increase.
So the
in building
financial
revenues from
projection
construction.
for 2014 is that there will be an
Now, I wanna
increase
point out one
in
thing
building
about
revenues with new
some of the,
construction.
Buildings that are.
Now,
that
I want
are,
to point out one thing about some of the,
being constructed
buildings
or proposed
that-
for construction or in some kind of stage of.
being constructed
planning.
or proposed
And there was a
for
list that was given
construction, or
to you.
in some kind of
Um,
stage of,
And we all need to understand
and
that
there was a
hopefully
list.
all of those projects will come to fruition
and
and all of them will be built and all of them will
Hopefully, all
expand
of
our
those
tax
projects
base. That
will
would be a
come to
great thing,
fruition.
and I think.
and all of them will be built,
Probably will happen.
and all of them
At least
will
a lot
expand
will
our
happen.
tax base. That would be a great thing.
But those things do not hit our
Probably will
bottom
happen.
line
At least a lot of it will happen.
for a
But
while.
those things do not hit our bottom line
Those buildings that are under
for a
construction
while.
or in planning
Those
are not being
buildings
taxed.
that are under
And
construction
they probably will not hit our tax rolls.
are not being taxed.
So,
And they probably
to
will not
give
hit
a
our tax
recurring
rate for
raise
3 years.
in 2014, because the
To
building
give a recurring
is under
rate
construction, that
in
might take
2014,
2 years to
because a
build, a
building
year and a half to build, and
is
not
under
hit the tax
construction,
rolls for another year,
it might take
or a year and a half
2
after
years to
that.
build, or a
It's
year and a
just
half to
not
build, and not
responsible.
hit the tax rolls for
When
another
that
year,
happens,
or a year and a
and
half.
there's actual money,
Just not.
and there's a safe reserve,
When that happens, and there's
then
actual money,
we will explore that. And in
And there's
actuality, that
reserve.
is part of the reason why we've
then
given you
we
information
will
about
explore that.
what is
In
to put on the table
actuality, that is
for
part of the
14,
reason why
15,
we've
and
given
beyond.
you
Because when we put on the table
What is
in the,
put on the table for
that's why it's
14,
relevant.
and
Because
beyond.
going forward,
Because we put
14,
on the table
15,
in the,
and 15, 16,
and that's why it's relevant.
and
Because
16,
going
17,
forward, 14,
we have come to the table with
15,
proposals that have recurring rates.
16, 17.
Because
We
we're
have
hopeful
gone to
that
the
at that
table with
point,
proposals
we can
that
at
have
least catch
recurring
up,
raises.
that these tax
Because we're
revenues
hoping
do
that
rise
at that
to the point
point,
where
we can at least
can
catch up,
actually do
that these
responsibly.
tax revenues do rise to the point where we
That's not-
can actually do responsibly a recurring increase. But that's not,
City's telling you that they're not going to meet their 20% self-imposed phantom reserve. It's now telling you that they can't give us raises because they can't reach the 20% self-imposed reserve. But now they're telling you that even though they're not going to make it, the city's allegedly in crappy shape, but it's in good shape, we're going to offer them recurring raises. I want you to believe in the next 6 months, things are magically going to change. How can they bring in raises that we haven't agreed to, proposals that violate every rule they're telling you to use to not give us a raise now? So I don't know if a future proposed contract proposal, a current proposed contract proposal for the future is relevant to this case. I don't care, then we'll sign right now for the next raise right now.
Right.
To give it to us straight out, we'll sign it.
If I may.
This is, I've never
right,
seen.
The point is made,
if I may.
the documents are coming in, they obviously are what they are.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, we, since this is, it seems to me to be,
Now,
besides
we-
the amount,
since this
there seems to be
is,
a dispute over whether or
it
not,
seems to me to be,
a wage
besides
action
the
at this
amount,
time
there
should be
seems to be a
recurring or
dispute over
non-recurring.
whether or not
What we think
a
should
wage
not be
action
recurring,
at this time should be
because we have
recurring or
concerns about
non-recurring.
fiscal year
We think it should not be
2014-15.
recurring because we have
And we
concerns
don't,
about
we
this
do not think it's fiscal
2014,
responsible to
15.
carry into 2014-15.
And we do not think it's
recurring
fiscally
burden.
responsible to carry into 2014-15.
So,
A recurring burden.
if we look at page 31, slide
So,
31, These are
if we
some
look
of
at
the
page 31, slide
factors
31,
that weigh
these are some of the factors that weigh
position at the
on
bargaining
our current
Now, we
position at the bargaining
will
table.
say that we're
Now, we,
positive, and we're going to suggest that there's a 4.5% projected growth in property tax revenues for fiscal year 2000. That does not include these new downtown developments, most of them. They're going to hit the city revenues in fiscal year 2017 if all goes well. So we will anticipate a revenue growth for 2015 of approximately $12 million. So now we have to look at expenditures in 2015 and how that compares to the $12 million of growth. And we have an estimated expenditure growth in the area, largely with personnel, of $25 million. We're going to experience in fiscal year 2015 a $9 million increase in pension costs. We're going to experience a $2.8 million increase in insurance, health and workers' comp. We will need $1.7 billion to implement the Affordable Care Act. There's a living wage ordinance, and we have to spend $1.8 million to implement that.
Is any of this exact as the number that we haven't found? I can't find it.
I'll hold your question.
Okay. Sorry, Mike.
$1.3 million to annualize an FOP wage increase. As I mentioned before, there was an FOP wage increase this year that was occurring of 3%. They made concessions in the contract to get to that, but that is a recurring annualized wage increase. We have put labor agreements on the table for fiscal year 2015, and if our position, which to date has not been accepted by any unions, if it was accepted, it would cost us an additional $3.5 million. And the union's wage proposals, if we were to accept them, the four that are on the table, it would exceed $30 million. Now, we're not even going to factor in the $30 million into the $25 million, but clearly what we are looking at is costs that will double revenue growth for fiscal year 2015, and we have to find the money to cover that. And to recur another $3 million on top of that list, we think is fiscally irresponsible. So, this is what we see on slide 32, which is our proposal as an impact in 2014 only, without a rollover impact beyond what we negotiated in the new contract. And their proposal would be a $3 million hit this year and a $3 million hit next year, in addition to what we would negotiate. Now, before I get into the close, I guess there's just a couple of things that I wanted to well, you know, there's a couple things I wanted to get into with regard to the presentation of 1907, but I think what I'm going to ask is if we are both going to be submitting some kind of post-hearing written submission, we can address any concerns about what explanations of the slides at that time.
You have the late exchange documents. That might be wise.
Well then, I'm going to say that. I do want to point out, though, that slide 34, that since the concessions in 2010, when we could, we have made certain restorations of benefits, and I think it's already reflected in the 1907 presentation. There were furlough days, we've eliminated the furlough days, and I have a chart to show you what kind of furlough days we've given overviews. I'll provide it to you in just a second. There was a take-home vehicle payment program. People had to take their cars home. We eliminated that and eliminated that cost. We reduced the employee pension contribution rate from 13% to 10% from 1907. And then we gave, as I mentioned, a 3% non-recurring pay increase in September 2013. And I think those actions to restore some paying benefits as we can since 2010 is also reflected in the 1907 presentation, slide 11. So, in summation, and I just have a couple of documents I'm going to give you that are referenced in the presentation. But in summation, we want, we value this workforce. We want to have financial sustainability. We think that is an obligation that we have to both the citizens of the city and to this workforce, so we don't have to face another 2010. And we want to achieve and maintain compliance with our ordinance, which is requisite for our financial integrity. So what we would suggest is that for 2014, that there would be a 2% non-recurring pay. And that carrying the $3 billion recurring for this unit into next year is not fiscally responsible. Because I had not seen the video. Mine is back until today. But I think what was telling at the very end is when the mayor said, and I think rightfully so for all of us, we can never go back to 2010. We can never be at that place again. And so we need to walk carefully as we come away from what happened in 2010 and move forward with stability, so people can feel as if the job and what they get paid, and then the security of the job is there. And we need to stabilize and not lurch forward until we're ready to move forward. And so that's our position. Like I said, Mr. Lawyer, I said a few things. I have a chart on the furloughs, and I have a chart on the contract concessions that were made by police and fire for the 2-year contracts. So with that, unless you have any questions, we can do it.
I have.
Okay.
Mr. Richard asked whether there was documentation of these additional 2015 expenditures.
We don't have it in that notebook, but we can provide it to you. We'll probably provide it before everyone leaves here today.
I'd be especially interested in the $9 million pension cost increase. Oh, these are in part of that. So I think.
Yes, all of that has been vetted out for next year because we're in that process of identifying costs for next year.
So this is why I have the 5-year forecast, which they have to file officially with the CAFRs, says something different than this. And that they say one thing, then they go on the word processor, make up things that aren't sworn. I want you to swear them under oath, under penalty of perjury, and put them down there. Now we have a contradiction between what we have given you, and you've seen none of this before today, of the CAFRs and the 5-year forecasting, which is now coming out different than these numbers that they've got here. And before we get to this hearing, not a single piece of paper has been given to a single union at any bargaining table and has extrapolated these out.
Oh, I would have to disagree. We've been talking about our
We've been
expenditures.
talking about it, and we all talk numbers, Michael.
But
We have the city's court who have to lower the wage rates to the city. No, but it's getting crazy. Let's get paper on top of paper.
Stop, please. I will expect the documentation.
Yes, sir.
I'll also expect an explanation of why this documentation is being given late. Now, give that in a picture. That's the best thing. I have other questions today, not about your presentation today, but about the other documents you sent. Do you want to address them now? Or would you rather address them with email among others?
It probably would be better on an email just because Mr. Richard may have other questions about what was submitted and he's saw them today.
Very good. Anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you.
I just have one request, because we saw this today, Mary's bringing up one or two issues that were raised in the PowerPoint.
Let's do that.
We're going to reserve it to the right as well. I think since we're going to get questions, we'll just do it all at one time. Is that okay with you?
Yes, put in some notes and then we'll talk about it. Did you say a minute now?
Chris, will help come on tomorrow.
All right, so in the next day or two, the city's going to provide the backup for the expenditure growth shown on PowerPoint page 31, plus an explanation as to each item as to why it has been accounted for prior. I went back to that when I first came. All right, have you any other business?
What do you want to do on briefing? We did agree to cooperate on briefing schedule. And that was even asked tonight.
This,
Yes.
This is fire and police concessions. And this is the further.
okay, and this is just an explanation of how furlough works. How a furlough works.
The city acts.
Just so that everyone knows what we're talking about.
She's doing this. But we're gonna have, we need a little bit of time to get the back and forth on all of the emails on the exhibits. It's hard to do a brief until I think everybody's closed. So,
I agree, yes. I have the advantage, I mean, for that.
So why don't we take it, let's anticipate a week or 10 days activity, and then go for a brief time.
we were thinking postmarked, what's the 30 days of June? 30? Is that okay?
That's a Monday. That would be up to you.
Yeah, or next week. Okay. There's no transfer.
All right, well, I know that these questions, and then go through this, both parties. The questions, and I'm going to wait. So we might, I'll have one. The couple, I think I can give a copy, all of you.
Can I ask a protocol question? If you direct a question, is it going to be clear to the party to which it's directed, and should the non-directed party feel free to respond as well? Or we just copy so that we have evidence, or if you will, recitation of the image?
Fair question. If I want to rejoin her, I'll be clear and address the question too. If I want to rejoin her, I think I need one, I'll let you know. Otherwise, ask before you speak.
Okay.
And it's in the audience. Let's keep this part simple.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. All right, this portion of the hearing is done. The attorneys are each going to use the next several days to look at the exhibits that they've seen today, most for the first time. They'll communicate with each other with regard to questions, and I'll do the same. Briefs will be submitted on June 30th. I hope that by that time I will understood the issues clearly enough so that there won't be anything that will really surprise me, and that my decision will issue a recommendation to issue within a few days after June 30th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.